Hey guys, it's Graham, and this is Hammer Time. I can't think of an election year where I have been less tuned in to the news. I grew up in a very, we'll say, politically active family. I remember my mom making a big deal about tracking the '92 election and her being bummed when Bill Clinton won, and that's when talk radio was really finding its footing, and all of the approved talking heads on the so-called right, which there were not very many of them at all in those days, were making fun of Ross Perot. In retrospect, that was a miss. But I don't doubt that he had somebody on the left encouraging him to run just to kind of siphon support off of HW. She was mad again when Clinton won re-election, but let's be honest, Dole was not an inspiring candidate. In fact, he was just one of those milquetoast establishment types who, hey, it's my turn, we're going to lose, but it's my turn. The Republican Party's been really bad about that. In fact, they kind of followed that model all the way up until Trump came along. The guy whose turn it was supposed to be, any number of those establishment picks. Jeb thought it was going to be Jeb, but that's that family being completely unable to read the room and realize that the world was just ready to never have another Bush in office. And he might have been the most competent and adept one, but it's too bad. He had to come in his brother's wake, didn't he? As far as establishment-approved outsiders, you had Ted Cruz and to a lesser extent Marco Rubio. Christie would have worked in the Northeast, but pretty much nowhere else. But Trump was just the anomaly that came and turned the entire system up on its head, which I think really scared the establishment on both sides because they've got this approved method that they have for electing a president. And that's what I want to talk about today. I really, really hate the fact, and this is going all the way back to the year 2000, me watching Bush versus Gore. And then 4 years later, I was kind of tuned out. I was overseas on my mission, and I didn't get my absentee ballot. But that was the first year that I was eligible to vote. I would have voted for Bush. I was a good little conformist conservative. 2008, I kept my ear to the ground. I was way more involved in all of the news, just an absolute political junkie. But like an idiot, I wanted Romney to get it, and then I sucked it up and voted for McCain and watched him lose, and blah, blah, blah. But every cycle since then, watching the process unfold, I've been exceedingly frustrated with how controlled it is. And I think about that scene in the Simpsons movie from 2007 where, this deep state guy, this, unelected bureaucrat guy is presenting plans to President Schwarzenegger for, how to deal with whatever the plot of the movie was, like the dome or something. And he goes, we'll leave it up to you to pick one of these 5 plans, Mr. President. But then he corrals the president into picking the plan that the handlers wanted. And I just think that's pretty much what it is. Like, if there are 50 states, then ostensibly there are 50 primary processes, whether they're primaries or caucuses. There are 50 nomination processes, but they've managed to whittle it down to at most 3, but effectively 2 states. If you don't win at least Iowa or New Hampshire, they've got a way to kick you out. And so there have been some few exceptions where you've got to win like one of those 2 and South Carolina, and by then it's over. And if you don't live in one of those states, you get to go screw yourself. Now, I grew up in Nevada, which in the late 2000s started to become semi-relevant in the primary process. But for most of my life, it wasn't. By the time the primaries or the caucuses came around to Nevada, the candidates were set for both parties. And if you had done early voting, and then between the early voting and the actual voting day, your candidate dropped out, you didn't get to modify your vote. So, early voting in primaries and caucuses was, a big disenfranchising process, but I don't think that the parties care about that. I think they like the limiting power that they have to really guide the process and pick the candidate that they want you to want. And they can isolate it in Iowa, they can isolate it in New Hampshire, and if they get to pick their candidate in 1/25 of the processes, then they really limit the choices that you get to have if you're voting in one of the two major parties, which most active voters vote in. So incrementalism is the name of the game if this process is going to be changed, because you can't just dramatically and drastically alter an established process like this without completely bucking the system. So here's my proposal. Instead of voting 1 week in Iowa, and then the next week in New Hampshire, and the next week in South Carolina, and then doing a Super Tuesday where, in the rare case is Super Tuesday still relevant, like that'll basically solidify the process on both sides. With the exception of 2008, where Hillary just would not take no for an answer, even when she was more or less like mathematically eliminated. She was really counting on those super delegates. And Huckabee stayed in just long enough on the Republican side so that he could claim that he was the second place guy in the hopes that that would get him the next in line status for 2012. Didn't work. That was kind of an outlier year, but it was coming at the end of a somewhat extraordinary and unique political era for both parties. The Democrats still feel that they won the 2000 election. They didn't. They were still very, very butthurt that Bush so handedly defeated them in 2004, and so they were ready to come and claim what they felt was theirs in 2008, and they had more of the momentum on their side. I think the right was thoroughly demoralized, but I'm getting out into the weeds. What's my idea? Graham, what is your idea? My idea is this. You vote in the primaries or the caucuses or whatever by time zone. You do 4 Super Tuesdays, we'll call it. Okay? We'll start with the East, since they think that they're the most important. That'll be the first one, and then a week later you do Central, a week later you do Mountain, a week later you do Pacific, and that'll wrap the process. And no early voting. And then the following cycle, you move it. Central gets it first, then Mountain, then Pacific, then Eastern. This would be very helpful to our democracy, to those who care about such things, and it would make the process much more level. Primaries or caucuses, depending on what your party dictates, that can be it. But it broadens the field. Candidates don't just have to appeal to Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina. They're going to have to get out and campaign in more than 4 states. I think that would also, not limit the field, but open the field up to those candidates who do enjoy broader support than just in, the live free or die state or, the Hawkeye state. All right. The candidates need to appeal to a broader cross-section of the electorate. But isolating it to time zones would still allow them to focus on a group that will have broader shared interests, but they will still have to appeal to a greater variety of demographics. I think that this would go a long way toward healing, we'll say, the divide between the two major parties and pulling them more to the center, which is closer to where they were in bygone years. They would have to overlap more in their policies, we'll say. But the handlers don't want that, which is exactly what would make it good for the people. So tell me what you think of this time zone primary method. Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific. Every 4 years, it changes to a different time zone, and every 16 years, yours gets to be first. I think that would be really good. All right, you guys know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.